that there's a product distinction that the founders had decided upon very early in the product development that has now had a profound impact on how people use Twitter. And the distinction I'm talking about is the one-way follow. So unlike a traditional social network, which is about mutual relationships, Twitter basically allowed you to follow users that you were interested in without having to worry about whether they're going to follow you back. So the effect it's basically had is that people are now following accounts based upon interest. So as opposed to being a traditional social network, Twitter is definitely social. We do, interact with people that we know, but it's not just social. It's moved beyond social to becoming an information network. So it's about interests and the consumption of information.
And just in terms of the product, it's fantastic. We all use it. It's growing exponentially. I don't necessarily have any concerns, but there's been quite a bit written about it as you try to switch on the revenue taps, that the product will be compromised in some way. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're looking at very, very carefully, and the reason for that is that we put our users first. I mentioned earlier that brands have been on Twitter since day one, so they're doing some really interesting things on Twitter. So, for example, when we launched in the UK, we had a number of partners that we launched with. So Sky announced that they were doing the season premiere of Glee on Twitter. EA had launched FIFA 12 by doing a campaign on a Sunday by doing live tweets that corresponded to some of the live football matches that were happening that day. Paramount just over the last weekend live streamed a movie premiere on Twitter, and then Eurostar gave away some tickets to users that were giving sort of creative responses to one of their tweets. So we do see a lot of very creative things happening on Twitter, and one of the important things for us is to watch that the content is actually very, very high quality. And so one of the things that we want to be able to do is, at a product design level, have quality and user interest in mind. And what I mean by that is there's a couple examples. So in order for an advertiser to promote their tweet into an ad, it has to first organically tweet that out to their followers. And marketers, very carefully build up followership over their period of life on Twitter. And so they think very carefully about the content they want to send to their followers. So that's the first level of quality control there. The second is something that we call resonance. So there's a resonance algorithm that basically determines how users are engaging with a promoted tweet. So if a tweet that's sent out by an advertiser is not getting engagement, either a favorite or a retweet or a reply, it'll just fall off. And importantly, people won't see it, and also the marketers won't have to pay for it. So that's all translating into some very, very good data that we have. I'll give you an example of some of the data. So for promoted tweets, we see an engagement rate, promoted tweets in search, an engagement rate of about 3 to 5%. So those of you that are in digital advertising know that that's a pretty staggering metric already. So, but that's very highly targeted. So it's keyword targeted for promoted tweet. And normally, if you think about having that less targeted, but for mass distribution, you would expect that engagement rate goes down. Instead, what we found is that the keyword targeted promoted tweets, when it's paired with a promoted trend, which is higher distribution but lower targeting, instead of going down, it actually went up. And it's a tremendous testimony to the kind of content that brands are bringing on our platform.
Great, fantastic. So we might take one or two questions in a moment. If you just start to raise your hands if you have a question, and we can spread one or two of the mics just around the audience. I'd just like to come back to user growth.
Sure.
So David a moment ago showed a statistic that in 2007 there were 5,000 tweets a day. I'm just wondering some of the metrics, the latest metrics
Sure.
that you have.
Yeah, I mean, we can update that. So we just announced that we have 100 million active users, and that's a tremendous testament to our users. They've been doing some amazing things on the platform, and again, we're just simply providing a place for users to communicate. But importantly, as all consumer companies should be doing, you're measuring growth on a number of different axes. So we like to see the active user number, but we also want to see growth in terms of content. And in terms of the content that's being generated on our platform, we see now over 250 million tweets per day. And to put that into context, it took us about 3 years, 2 months, and a day to reach 1 billion tweets. and now we do that in about 4 days. So you pair both the creation of content and the growth there, as well as the growth of active users. And we now see that across all the meaningful metrics, that the vital signs for Twitter are very, very strong.
Fantastic. So we just have time actually for one question from the floor. So has somebody got a microphone? Could they stand up and just say who they are and where they're from?
Hi, my name is Brian. I'm from Dublin, but I live in Slovenia in the centre of Europe. I read an interesting article from a European business journal complaining that there's actually some dissent in Ireland about a lot of multinationals like Twitter coming to Ireland and not actually giving the best jobs to the Irish workforce. Not to devalue jobs like support and QA, but Twitter is very much an engineering-driven company. So my question is, will a lot of the core engineering jobs be coming to Dublin?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's early days for us. So one of the unique things about the London office, interestingly, when we announced that we had a Dublin office, they had some people, I don't know, for some reason, assumed that we were shutting down our London office and moving to Dublin. I think we've gone to the point in international business evolution that it's possible to have multiple offices. One of the things that distinguishes that office is that we do have a large engineering team there. And that was by way of acquisition of TweetDeck, which was a very popular Twitter application. And so that's not something that we could have predicted a year or two ago. And so here in Dublin, it's still very early stages. We've had our first couple of hires, and we're open to, again, all those other factors about how we grow internationally, what the available workforce looks like. And there are very, very important functions that we're basing here that we're planning for this year. So I would say that it's early for us, but it's definitely something that it's, much like in London, we couldn't have predicted it, but it's definitely something that we're open to.
Fantastic. Well, Tony Wang, thanks so much for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Wang.